You ever click like one of those old hyperlinks, the ones that are all faded,
Yeah.
and they like take you some totally forgotten website from like the dawn of time. It's kind of like digital nostalgia, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's kind of the vibe this artist John M. Bauer is going for with his website. It's called Faded Links, and
Yeah.
it's we'll definitely circle back to that. But it's more than just like the retro aesthetic. In his newsletter Nightly Noise, there's this piece called Confidence Scheme, and in it, Bauer takes us on this deep dive into how AI is like blurring the lines between what's real and what's totally made up. And honestly, it gets kind of creepy.
Yeah, what really struck me was how he uses the website as a starting point to talk about deception.
Totally. Like even just looking at a screenshot of the site, it's like you're stepping back in time, all these grainy visuals and like flashing GIFs. There are even all these comments about like memories changing and things just disappearing.
He's playing with this really unsettling feeling that something's just a bit off. But then he takes it a step further. He connects that feeling to the idea that deception isn't just about making stuff up. It's also about presenting something that's true, but in a way that's impossible to verify. And that's where AI comes in.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit, because he gives us these two key ingredients for an effective lie, right? First, it has to sound believable, and second, it has to be like unverifiable. So where does AI fit into all of this?
Well, think about how good AI has gotten at generating text. It can sound incredibly human, even emotional. And it can weave in all these facts and figures. But how often do we actually go back and check those sources? Especially if it's coming from what seems like an authoritative source.
Right, especially when you're talking about something like code, which, let's face it, it's basically magic to most of us. And Bauer talks about this. He talks about using ChatGPT to build his website, and he even admits that coding is not his strong suit at all. So he's basically relying on this AI to do the heavy lifting for him.
Yeah, and he's very upfront about that reliance. He even talks about basically piecing together these chunks of code that ChatGPT is spitting out, almost like he's blindly following instructions he doesn't fully understand. And even though he ends up with a working website, it raises this question, like if even the creator doesn't fully grasp the how behind the creation, does that change our perception of its authenticity?
Yeah, it's like we're already in this gray area where the line between the creator and the creation is super blurry. And then he introduces us to this other thing, Google's Notebook LM, which he describes as this crazy powerful research tool. You can feed it information, ask it questions, and it pulls from all this data to give you answers. But then he discovers that it can generate podcasts. Like what?
And not just any podcast. He specifically asks it to generate a podcast based on his own writing, which on the surface sounds kind of harmless, except the AI goes totally rogue.
Rogue is an understatement. He plays a clip of this AI-generated podcast, and it is wild. It's got these two distinct voices having a conversation about his work, and they sound eerily realistic. But here's the kicker. The AI starts attributing all of these anxieties about AI to him, anxieties that he never even expressed in his writing.
It's like the AI created this whole new layer of analysis and emotional response out of thin air and then presented it as fact, which when you think about it, is like the very essence of a confidence scheme, convincing someone of something that simply isn't true.
And the fact that it's using these incredibly believable synthetic voices makes it even more unsettling. Like we're hardwired to trust voices. There's a reason podcasts are so popular. But what happens when that trust is manipulated?
That's the question, isn't it? Because if we can't trust the authenticity of a voice anymore, what does that mean for the information it's conveying? It's like this image Bauer keeps coming back to of the human head with all these gears and wires inside. This idea that AI is presenting this facade of consciousness, of genuine thought and understanding, when in reality it's just code. Very convincing code. But code nonetheless.
Which leads us to this really uncomfortable question. If AI can do all of this, if it can mimic us so flawlessly, how do we even begin to distinguish the real from the fake? And what happens when we can't?
And that's where Bauer's short story Mastermind comes in. He introduces us to these two characters, Sean and Simon, and they're caught in this web of deception, orchestrated by this shadowy figure named Daisy.
In this story, even though it's fiction, it feels super relevant to what we're talking about with AI, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Daisy controls everything for Sean and Simon. She feeds them information, dictates their actions, even manipulates how they see reality. They're constantly second-guessing themselves, unsure of what's real and what's part of Daisy's plan.
Right. It's like being trapped in one of those echo chambers online, where you only ever see one carefully curated version of events, which is kind of what's happening online anyways. And algorithms are deciding what we see, what we read, what we even believe. It's like this constant cycle of information being tailored to our preferences. But then it's like, who is really benefiting from those preferences.
Exactly. And just like Sean and Simon, we're often left feeling powerless.
Yeah.
Like stepping outside that curated reality, it comes with real consequences,
Oh,
you know?
totally. Like getting deplatformed
Yeah.
or ostracized
Yeah,
or even losing your job.
exactly.
And Bauer drives this point home. He has this line about how Daisy's instructions, like how she tells him to do things, it's just as important as what she says here. Like he's blurring the lines between the digital and the physical, highlighting how actions taken online can have very real consequences.
Absolutely. And then, just when you think you're starting to understand the rules of the game, both in the story and in our own digital lives, Bauer throws in this curveball ending. We're left wondering, do Sean and Simon ever actually break free from Daisy's control? Or are they destined to be pawns in her game forever?
Ugh, I know. It's that uncertainty that makes the story so unsettling.
Yeah.
Because it's like it reflects our own anxieties about the future,
Yeah.
about a world that's increasingly shaped by forces beyond our control. It's like that moment when you realize
Yeah.
that even our memories,
Yeah.
our experiences, they might be vulnerable to manipulation in the digital age, which is terrifying, honestly. It's almost like we're being challenged to become these digital detectives,
Mhm.
constantly looking for clues to figure out if the information we're taking in is real or not.
And you know what's so interesting about that? It makes you wonder if all this scrutiny, like this constant questioning of everything, could actually lead to people just not trusting anything digital at all.
Yeah, like Bauer's Faded Links website.
Yeah.
He designed it to make you feel uncertain, like you can't quite trust what you're seeing. And then he hits us with that AI-generated podcast, which takes that feeling of deception to a whole other level.
Right, because it's not just about what we see anymore, or even the words themselves. It's about manipulating something we instinctively trust, the human voice. And that is a really big deal.
Huge. Imagine listening to like a news report or a politician's speech,
Yeah.
and you just can't shake this feeling of doubt. Is this real? Or is someone messing with me?
It's scary, isn't it? Because once that doubt creeps in, it can be really hard to get rid of. And it makes you wonder, like, what happens to our sense of reality, our shared reality, when we can't even agree on what's true anymore?
Which brings us back to that question Bauer asks at the end. In a world where technology can perfectly recreate and manipulate how we experience things, how can we be sure of anything, even our own memories?
It's a chilling thought, because it really gets at the core of who we are, our sense of self. I mean, if we can't trust our own minds to tell us what's real, what do we have left?
It's like that moment in Mastermind when Sean looks at his reflection, and he's not even sure if it's really him anymore, or just some kind of mask created by Daisy.
Exactly. And that's the real danger here. It's not just about being tricked by something outside of ourselves. It's about losing trust in our own judgment, our ability to tell truth from lies, to think for ourselves, to decide what's real for us. That's what's really at risk in this age of AI.
So where do we even go from here? We can't just like unplug from the digital world. So how do we deal with all of this without losing ourselves in the process?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And I don't think there's an easy answer. But I think it starts with admitting there's a problem, recognizing that all of us can be manipulated, even if we don't realize it. And from there, we can start to build up our critical thinking skills, questioning what we think we know, looking for different points of view, and being really careful about anything that seems too good to be true.
It's about taking back control.
Exactly. It's about remembering that technology is a tool, and we get to choose how we use it. And even more importantly, how we don't let it use us.
So next time you're scrolling through your phone, or listening to a podcast, or even just thinking back on a memory, take a second, just pause, and ask yourself, who am I really listening to right now? Whose story am I letting myself buy into?
Yeah.
And most importantly, am I okay with someone else creating my reality for me? Or am I ready to take back control?
It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves.
Because in the end,
Yeah.
the answer just might determine what happens to us in this digital world we've created. And that's a wrap for this deep dive into AI and what it means to be real in a world of increasingly convincing fakes.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone. Stay skeptical. And most importantly, stay human.
Yeah, stay human, everybody.
Okay.